Just check again as well, Angelo. It's Stracquatanio.
Nailed it.
Stracquatanio. Okay, perfect. Welcome back to another episode of the BioHub. Today, we have an extraordinary guest in Angelo Stracquatanio, the co-founder and CEO of Apprentice.io. Angelo is a visionary in the life science industry, leading the world's first cloud-based manufacturing execution system for life sciences, with over $200 million raised from leading VC funds and being ranked number 60 fastest growing software company on the Inc. 5000. Apprentice.io is revolutionizing the industry with its innovative solutions. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome Angelo. How are you?
I'm doing well, Max. I really am excited to be on the pod as a listener. You shine a lot of light on the really interesting things going on in life sciences. And so to be a guest is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's amazing to hear. I feel like we've come a long way since the first season, even back then. Just to start us off, can you share a bit about your journey and also the early days of Apprentice.io? What were some of the biggest challenges you faced in getting things off the ground?
Yeah, it's really interesting because this is actually our 10-year anniversary. So we're 10 years into this now. 2014 is when we started the business all those years ago. And we always had the same focus. The thesis has not changed. The focus has not changed. My energy, I'm somehow probably even higher energy than I was even 10 years ago. But the whole premise was built around a simple concept, which is we knew at that time, which interestingly 10 years later is actually playing out, where 10 years ago, we started to see the trends form in life sciences around personalized medicine. We started to see manufacturing go through a lot of changes too, in terms of the techniques that were being used, the technologies being used, the just kind of focus, I would say, as an industry that people are placing on the space. And so at the time, 10 years ago now, we thought that augmented reality was going to be the kind of driver of change within the space because for what it's worth, I still believe in head-worn. I still believe in augmented reality. And if you ask Zuckerberg, he's still really a big champion of it too. But the point is, even if I'm joking a little bit, the interesting thing is that this space is unique in the sense that everyone in manufacturing, not only is the process wildly complex, but ergonomically, you need to work with your two hands. In many ways, it's a fairly simple challenge in those early days. And so we thought augmented reality was going to be the driver of change, and head-worn devices and Google Glass was going to be the kind of big thing that we thought was going to modernize the space. However, 10 years ago now, when we first got into these companies, and I remember being in a manufacturing suite in Kansas City, Missouri. One of our largest customers today, one of our first customers and largest customers today that's still with us 10 years on. I remember standing in suite, observing and watching our customers work and saying to myself, man, this space doesn't just need augmented reality. This space really needs a very modern, thoughtful, user-driven, operator-focused, and highly capable manufacturing execution system. Now, for what it's worth, it took me a few years of being in suite to come to this realization. But that's when we really then decided as a company that it's not just augmented reality that we need to focus on. And yes, we still use head-worn devices because, call me a little bit crazy, but I still believe in head-worn. I still believe in augmented reality. And for what it's worth, the system is now fully native running on the Vision Pro. So just have to say that. But the piece, though, that's the most important on this is that core manufacturing system really had to be there in order to enable this next generation of therapeutics that we're seeing come to market. So even right now, we're working on 2 of the commercially approved gene therapies that are in market today. And 10 years ago, this was just as a thought. This was just like, wow, we're seeing these drugs in the pipeline. We know that the manufacturing process is very different. We had a hypothesis that, when you're making drugs at an individual level, not a big batch scale, that the software was going to have to be different. 10 years on, that we're seeing that being proven out in spades. And so it's just really interesting, just the journey that we've taken, the focus that we've had. And, when I look back on these last 10 years, I'm really proud of what the team's accomplished because, in the early days, we were a small team. There were just a few of us. And, Max, you and I were just joking before we got on the pod around we were in our first office and there was just a few of us sharing the same bathroom and throwing out the trash and all the things, to fast forward to where we are today. And we have an extraordinarily gifted team around us who's not only built this product, but has found ways to deploy this product at scale. And now we're right on the precipice of releasing our, which we're actually announcing here on the pod, our AI capabilities. And so all these years later, it's really interesting to see this evolution from an initial idea, initial concept that was rooted in a problem. Our technology maybe wasn't exactly right, 10 years ago in terms of augmented reality. But when we really did build out this core manufacturing system, start to deploy it, start to scale it, and then start to make it just way, way, way more advanced, to be where we are 10 years later, and to now add AI into it, that's why I think I'm way more energized now than I was even 10 years ago.
I think it's so exciting. And you're right, we were talking about it earlier on. And like for me, I really relate to your story because it's different, but also reasonably similar, like the kind of paths we could go on. So you looking at you guys 10 years on, it's pretty inspiring. And then when you look at that journey, like what were the milestones that you were like, yeah, they had to happen and we're super proud of those? And then how has the company really evolved beyond that?
Yeah, when I look back and there's something about a 10-year anniversary that's very nostalgic. It's very reflective. I know how I was as a person 10 years ago. I know where the company was. I know where the product was. In the early days, I was the only software engineer. I wrote all of that code, frankly, probably the first couple of versions myself. And it took a while for the team to pry my fingers off the keyboard and lock me out of GitHub to stop me from typing. Because, at the end of the day, my role has evolved quite a bit now. I'm 100% a mission-driven CEO at this point. But at my heart, I'm still an engineer. I still love building things. And when I look back on the last 10 years, a lot of the milestones we hit as a company, of course, you can imagine I've anchored around product. At the same time, though, what I've come to really learn and appreciate 10 years later are a lot more of the more subtle milestones that we've accomplished together. And so, kind of walk you through a little bit of memory lane here. When we go back, starting way at the beginning, one of the earliest milestones we had was, at the time, this was just a concept. I built the first version of the product. I had no idea whatsoever if anyone would even care about this thing. But we went to Interfex, which is one of the large trade shows in Manhattan in 2015. So just shortly after we launched. And we went to this trade show, and I'll never forget because I spent $16,000 on my credit card just to show up to the show. This wasn't even including the booth or the kind of the collateral that we had, or the headsets that were there, the equipment, all the stuff. It was 16 grand just to show up. And by the way, it was way in the back corner, like insane back corner. But we got to the show, and to our surprise, we won Best New Product worldwide for pharma manufacturing in 2015. And, it was at that moment where it was a pretty big shock, quite frankly. And it wasn't due to insecurity, quite frankly, I'm just generally an optimistic entrepreneur. I believe in the power of software. I believe in the power of our team. But, I didn't know if anyone was going to care. And turns out they did. And what's so, just cool about that moment all those years ago was that was our first big break. And it came pretty quick. As soon as we launched the business, we launched at Interfex. That was our first public event that we had as a business. And so to win Best New Product all those years ago, it was kind of the big moment where it's like, hey, there's something here, right? But just because there's something here doesn't mean that that's where you stop. We then went through a whole series of learnings. It's a polite word that I'll use for the early days at Apprentice. Another word that I use is getting punched in the face, in terms of learning that we needed to really up-level everything. We needed to up-level our product, our understanding, our quality, our approach. All of those things had to get up-leveled through those years. And then another key milestone was when we raised our first round of financing. That was in 2017. So almost 4 years into the business, where it was just me and Gary, my co-founder, out there in the wilderness, we had a few other people working with us, but predominantly we were the kind of main driver at the time. But when we finally raised our first round of financing, it was like, hey, we can scale out the team now. We can finally start to build out this vision. And in 2017, that's when we started to pivot towards our core MES, where that is now what the business has become all these years later. And so when we finally launched that first version, which was right before the pandemic, I'd say that was another milestone, because it was really interesting because, like I said in my opener, we thought augmented reality was going to be the first kind of driver of change. But what really was the driver of change, which came through listening and watching and observing our customers and listening to the feedback they had, the pains that they had, the unique challenges that they experienced when they were in the manufacturing suite, or when they were trying to create and design a recipe, or review and release it, or manage their data, or tech transfer it in, whatever these challenges were at the time. Just by simply listening and observing and trying to be a good partner to our customers, we then finally released at that point, it was version 5. My gosh, this is many years later now. Version 5 of the platform right before the pandemic. And that was a big milestone moment. It was like, hey guys, we have something here. This is our first MES. This is something where you can go through and run a recipe and interact with material and equipment. And it was the early innings of what has now become Tempo, fast forward 7 years later from there. And so what's really unique is that was kind of milestone 2. It's like, all right, we bridged from augmented reality to a manufacturing platform. Big moment. And then COVID hit. A few short months later. And that's when everything changed, because this industry was going through a once in 100 year challenge, where this industry was the one who helped get us out of the worst pandemic we've seen in 100 years. And it was the thing that ultimately was not only going to get us out of our bedrooms again, but it was going to help save and ensure that many, many, many more lives were not going to be lost to this truly awful disease that was was sweeping the world at the time. And we were right in the middle of it. We were absolutely right in the middle of it, because what's really interesting is, prior to COVID, cloud was this amorphous concept. It was something that people didn't fully understand or appreciate, or at the time they just weren't as confident or comfortable with. And so when COVID came around, it was this moment where there was no choice. The only way you can deploy software, the only way you can collaborate, the only way you can do things from your bedroom was through the cloud. And so that was our I'd say the next big milestone, because that was our big credibility break. Yes, we scaled our revenue. Yes, we scaled our team. All that fun stuff was there too. But the way that I classify COVID for us was, we met the moment as a team, because we are trying to help solve COVID around. And just to be clear, I'm not putting myself or our team in the same category as the scientists and the operators and all the folks on our customer end who were in suite during that time trying to actually save this pandemic. We were just on the supporting cast. So I just want to make that note, because what we saw from our customers was nothing short of an absolute miracle during that period of time. And, as I reflect on the crazy things that they did, and, the lack of fear that they had to execute during that moment, it was inspiring to say the least, and motivating to no end. And so we were just a supporting cast, but we did help them through that period of time. And that's what really then gave us credibility, because at this point, we built a great product. We had started to have some early success with our customers, but COVID started to hit us at a nice point in scale, so that we can then really show the world that, hey, it's not just cool software, but that we have this base of customers too. And that's when we took a shot to really up-level Tempo at this point, where, like I mentioned, V5 was launched before the pandemic. And then we built out version 6 of Tempo, which really up-leveled the capability. And that's when then we took that product that had its initial kind of feature set, and boy, did we run. And we ran fast. And to say that the team was motivated was the understatement of the world. And so I'd say the next big milestone after COVID was when we launched version 6 of the platform. And this version was really, truly built for world-class manufacturing and had a ton of capability in it. and was the version of our platform which then not only gave us credibility, not only solved our customers' use cases, but then unlocked really unique problems that our customers couldn't solve without it. And this is where then the first customers that were starting to use it for cell and gene therapy were finally using a system that could handle, multi-run scale, that can handle chain of identity and custody, that can really handle a lot of the unique intricacies of that space. And so it proved out again that theory we had all those years ago. And then as we continued to grow, we obviously raised more capital. And at that point now, I think that summer we raised like $100 million. The team continued to grow and scale. And our revenue scaled with it, which to me is less of a reflection of us and more of a reflection of the industry, that the industry was really at a moment in which they really could see the need for new and emerging technology that can help them solve real business problems. So to me, our growth is a reflection of our customers, not the other way around necessarily. And then along the way, we are named by Forbes the next billion-dollar startup, which is also really fun and really cool. But again, it's all those milestones come back to the fact that what we've done all those years is rooted in watching our customers, listening to our customers, and building for them. And so when you fast forward to where we are today, version 7 was released back in 2023 now. So, about a year ago at this point. And version 7 now is not just an MES, because the manufacturing execution system is, in our opinion, is one piece of the puzzle. We've vertically integrated this platform now. So what does that mean? It's a bit technical, but we have our manufacturing execution system. We have our automated control system. So you have your manual execution, the MES, you have your automated execution. We're not calling it a DCS, but just our automation layer. We then also have our laboratory execution system. So in one platform, you can have your manufacturing and quality control in a single place, because the whole goal is to release batches faster. And if we can do so, by combining manufacturing and QC, that obviously makes a ton of sense. But then on top of that, we've also released something that we call our connected manufacturing network, because as we scaled, we saw that the manufacturing data was paramount to the decision-making that happened strategically above manufacturing. And so the only way they can access that data, make decisions on it, and then use that data to then introduce new products faster, tech transfer them in, collaborate between a contract manufacturer and a sponsor. The only way to do that is with software. And so we built out what we call CMN, our connected manufacturing network. So this way you take all those subsystems on one platform, and then you network all of those sites and teams together globally in the business and externally as well. So you can then actually connect to your contract manufacturers and have all of your manufacturing data across all of your sites and teams, in addition to your external contract manufacturers as well. And so when you do all of this, you're now in a place in which the platform is way more than just on the shop floor execution. You're looking more at a global enterprise system that is help making strategic decisions as a business. And now in 7.4, strapping a ton of AI onto this, to us, it just completely changes the approach to how you manufacture, not just how you use software in this space. And so there's been a lot of milestones. It's been a long 10 years, but there's a lot that I'm proud of and what the team has accomplished over this period of time, because they've fought through all types of challenges, whether it's product challenges or pandemic challenges or, just whatever it is, we've done it. We've done it and they've done it. And yeah, so it's pretty cool 10 years on to see where we're at.
I think what's really interesting as well is like you've continued to innovate throughout that 10 years. Like you've never stopped, you've never rested on your laurels. Like I think that's really cool. And there's a famous saying that we really live by as well. And it's if you put your customer first, then everything else will follow. And I feel like by you like sitting down, listening, trying to understand the people you're working with, like that's where that innovation's really come from.
Yeah, because otherwise it's just tech, right? If you just build stuff that's cool, there's no implicit value in it. Like, don't get me wrong, it looks interesting for the engineers. It's fun to build, and again, as an engineer myself, or recovering or former engineer, whatever you want to classify me as, it is fun to build those things. But at the end of the day, especially in life sciences, and that's where my experience is, so I can't speak to other industries, but I like to think that, you can boil a business down to very simplistic principles. And those first principles are pretty clear. It's, hey, your customer who's buying this thing has a problem. You need to solve it. But the only way to solve it is to not use your own implicit biases or your own thoughts on what you think could help do it. You need to listen to them and you need to watch them, and you need to be thoughtful. You need to be empathetic. And then you need to then come up with very clever ideas to solve their problems. And that's where the fun is. Doing it in reverse, where you just kind of come up with an idea in a bubble and hope that somebody's going to buy it or somebody's going to use it, is unfortunately a bit misguided. And I like to think that we have been very much, obviously, customer centric over these 10 years, but have we made mistakes in terms of building something that we thought, and then we just built it in a bubble and we went against our own principles in that case? And then we would show a customer, they're like, what are you talking about? Of course that's happened. But I'd say by and large, and the overwhelming majority of our innovation has come through listening and empathy. And so, it's pretty neat because we're 10 years in and we're on our 7th major version of the software. There's a competitor of ours, and I won't name names, but they're on only version 3, major version 3. And that's like 20 years into the business. I'm 10 years in, I'm at major version 7. and every single one of those was a giant step forward in our capability set. And so we are not going to stop anytime soon. And, with our AI release now, I think it's just the next evolution of what manufacturing is going to look like. Not just in this space, because we're also announcing that we're bridging outside of life sciences too, because turns out life sciences isn't the only one who has these problems. And, our product is not only unique in life sciences, but it's unique in manufacturing. And so, it's pretty neat all these years later, but it's all born from a simple principle. Even our AI capabilities, by the way, is just listen, empathize, and then build a solution to an actual pain that exists that can provide value.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. And it shows we don't often look at our competitors and try and compete against each other. But we actually did an exercise when we first started Avetix, which was to get a whiteboard in front of all of us. Let's just write down all the issues that we want to solve. And then it's like, how do we solve them? What do we need to do? And it was almost like a tick boxing exercise at the start. And it was like, if we do that, that solves that, but that misses that. And it, like a jigsaw. I'm not claiming to be anywhere near as complex as what you guys are doing, but I don't know if it was like a similar experience.
100% it is. And to me, regardless of scale, there's certain things that don't change. And if you just kind of have a kind of first principles mindset on like, what's the basic way that you can build a great product for your customers, regardless of scale, you can do it by simply just listening to your customers and solving their problems. And I'd hate to trivialize it to that way, but because to be clear, to actually operationalize that is actually very difficult, especially when you start to get bigger and you're dealing with a lot of different competing resources and priorities and customers. And, it's one thing solving one problem for one customer. It's another one, you have a lot of customers who have lots of needs and you're trying to prioritize resource against it, do it in a timeline that makes sense, have an extremely, extremely high quality bar to all of this. And so, the operational piece of it becomes more difficult as you scale, but the core of it, listening, empathizing, and then trying to solve your customers' challenges without any preconceived notion of what the solution may be. That doesn't change. And I like to think even as we continue to scale that won't change for as long as, we're around. Which is hopefully 100 years.
Looking, I suppose, at that future, what are your thoughts on AI? And how do you see that really impacting the industry?
Yeah. So to take a step back, and I'm going to connect this to augmented reality for a moment, if you bear with me, and go on a bit of a journey here. Because I've spent so much time, it's not just me, it's the whole team, because we've spent so much time in emerging technology. And augmented reality was the first emerging technology that we used 10 years ago, but it was not the last emerging technology. It's been built into this product over these 10 years. And AI won't be the last emerging technology we build into this thing as we continue to grow over the years. But what we found, whether it was augmented reality whether it actually was cloud, because we were the first to figure out how the heck do you deploy a fully validated, scalable manufacturing system in life sciences in the cloud. That whole stack of tooling, software, testing, validation, documentation, internal process, you name it, that was really hard. Mm-hmm. And then when you also then kind of layer in all these other capabilities that we now built in around mobile devices, and how do you even deploy iPads in a manufacturing suite? You know, it may sound simple on its surface, but actually is wildly complex. You know, how do you then innovate in terms of quality? You know, because we want to still be able to release software really fast, but our quality bar, especially over the last 6 to 9 months, has absolutely exploded. And so the point of all of this is, over these 10 years, we have had to figure out, how do you solve these challenges of introducing new and emerging technology, whether it's infrastructure related, augmented reality related, mobile device related, multi-cloud related, big data related, analytics related, whatever it was, that emerging set of capabilities. We've had to figure out, how do you ultimately turn into a product, and then how do you have it be validated and deployed and used in manufacturing. So when I think about AI, I first approach it with that mindset of, how can this technology not just be cool? Because don't get me wrong, there are moments when I even personally have been using AI where it feels like magic. And this is someone who, by the way, like, again, recovering or former engineer, I understand the math behind it. I understand the actual engineering behind it. And even I am just absolutely stunned at times, the capability of this technology. But the reality is that it's still emerging, right? We're still figuring out how it's used. We're still figuring out how you can use it in a manufacturing environment. We're still figuring out how that gets done in a regulated manufacturing environment, all of those different things. So when I think about AI, not only do I believe to my core that this is a fundamental shift in the technology landscape, period, not just in manufacturing, just, at this point now, I'm pretty deep into my career. No one has seen anything like this, not only me, but, our advisors, our investors. This truly is a sea change in terms of the tech. But when it comes to then, how do we then apply it? And how do I think about AI in manufacturing? With all those things said, we're approaching it from a very pragmatic lens, because we've seen so many emerging technologies be deployed before, but we've also faced the reality of deploying said emerging technologies. And so we've had to be very, very thoughtful about, how can AI be used, but also at the same time do no harm? Because, if you're using AI for pretty low risk things, for example, hey ChatGPT, help me talk through, in your case, Max, like how to go through an interview process. And you're using AI as a coach, fairly low risk, very valuable, but pretty low risk. Conversely, on the absolute other side of it, if AI is being used to make decisions in manufacturing that can ultimately change or modify the outcome of a batch that's going to go into a human being, I'd say there's a little bit different, risk and guardrails that you have to put around the technology and how you use it. And so can I announce a Max on the pod with our newest release that we're going to announce here with AI?
100%. Go for it.
Cool. All right, we're going to do it. You're going to hear it first. So we are launching 7.4 of our platform. And so you heard it here first on the pod, in the sense that we are now embedding AI in every part of our platform. And we have 7 core pillars for where AI is going to be injected into. But AI and AI safety, especially in manufacturing, is absolutely paramount. And so you'll see, as I walk through these capabilities, where we believe that AI can add some really high value, but the same token, where we are taking a very thoughtful lens to its application, such that we don't do any harm, number one. But number two, that this technology can not end up sitting on the shelf and be a fad, but actually be something that's transformative. Because if this gets rolled out and it makes mistakes or does harm, my concern is that we're not going to see AI in manufacturing for another decade. just due to the kind of criticality of this space, let's say. Mm-hmm. And so how we've approached AI is broken down a couple different buckets. And the first one is what we call process design. So you can then use via a prompt, you can interact with our platform to create a complete recipe from scratch. And so if you want to write a buffer prep recipe, for example, hey, I need a buffer prep recipe, here are my basic parameters, et cetera, et cetera. And we automatically generate for you a fresh recipe complete from scratch. Subsequently, when you then move into process creation, so at this point, you have your outline, you have your initial recipe design, you then want to very quickly iterate on this, get ideas, look at data, make decisions on your recipe as you're designing it. So we call it process creation. So this is where then, again, using a prompt, you can generate content, you can add steps, remove them, modify them, switch them around, bring in data from other areas, and ultimately create a really nice experience for the operator to just be like a force multiplier in terms of their recipe design, creation, iteration, etc. Then we get to process simulation. So once you've created your initial recipe, once you've really iterated on it and you feel good about it, then you can simulate this recipe, because we really believe that in order to increase the rate of change in the space, you need to increase the confidence in the changes you're making. So to do so right now, when you go through validation, so much of it is manual testing, manual kind of test script execution, manual documentation, et cetera. We want to move that all to digital. And so in our process simulation bucket, this is where then we then take that recipe that you created. Oh, and by the way, for the listeners who don't understand when I'm referencing recipe, this is akin to a batch record, or for those of you that aren't even familiar with the space, this is your manufacturing process that you follow. And this is where you follow the steps, but more importantly, you take raw materials and turn them into finished goods. And this is where it manages all of your material, it interacts with all of your equipment, it documents all of your data. So again, for the listeners who don't understand what I'm referencing when I say recipe or batch record, think of it just as your manufacturing process. Anyway, process simulation then simulates this entire record, goes through, and there's all different types of ways that we can simulate this. And when we do our apprentice webinar, you can actually see this live, and we'll demo this to everybody. And then subsequently, once you've then simulated this and you feel good about it, you can move it to the shop floor to then start manufacturing. And this is the area where we're being most thoughtful around, because this is where decisions get made. And if you have the AI make a decision, it's bad, bad. And so instead, we're taking an approach where this is more akin to a co-pilot in this area. We went a bit risk off, quite frankly, on the shop floor, because we just don't have the confidence yet, keyword yet. We have the technological capability today that absolutely exists, but we don't have the confidence yet that the result set would be a high enough degree of again, just confidence that what it's recommending would lead to an appropriate outcome. I do think, for what it's worth, the AI is making really good recommendations. And I think the decisions it's making are on its way to being as good as human-based decisions, if not more. But we're not there yet, and we need to be honest about that. So on the shop floor, it's more of a co-pilot type capability where you can ask questions of it while you're processing. Hey, what happened on the shift last night? Can you summarize for me what's going on? Hey, what are the next couple of steps coming up? Do I have to prepare anything? And how should I think about this? Hey, are we starting to see any deviations that have formed in the last 2 hours? And should I go take a look as a supervisor? And so that's kind of more of the kind of on the shop floor capability set, which for what it's worth is highly valuable in and of itself, because this is a way where you can see what's going on with your recipe, see what's going on the shop floor like you've never had before. And so even though it's not making decisions yet, it's still getting to the point where it is a pretty magical experience when you can talk to this thing, get feedback from this thing, and really use it as a way to better optimize your day-to-day operations. Then post-execution, this is where there's a lot of fun stuff going on. This is in recipe review. So as you're reviewing the record, this helps you summarize, this helps you find trends, this helps you really get a good grasp of what's going on after you're done executing on the shop floor to ultimately aid in faster batch release. Because our big goal, the big value is how do we release batches faster? And this is a big area of focus in which we think AI can then leverage the data that exists in the system to start to give a lot of interesting content back to the user to ultimately make better and faster decisions. And in this case, release the batch, provide content, help the human release the batch. And then in the area of most active development, I'd say, and this is probably the most interesting area of all of this, if that wasn't already interesting, is in optimization. Because we are then looking at all this data that you have across all of your runs, many, many, many runs, and then starting to make recommendations for how to change your recipe going forward to try to optimize your process and get close to either golden batches, to try to fine tune different process parameters, whether it's CPPs or CQAs, whatever it is. And in clinical, this is really exciting because it's like in real time, our goal is to give you the tools to very quickly create your content, get it to the shop floor, execute really quickly on the shop floor, bring all that data back up, review your data, and then optimize it for the next run. And so in clinical manufacturing, we think this is going to be a pretty big sea change in terms of the iteration that this space will experience. And so suffice to say, we're very excited about AI, but to my earlier comment, we're just being very thoughtful, pragmatic, and realistic about the capabilities today en route to what we know is coming tomorrow, which is decisions. This thing will make decisions. It's just, we want to make sure that when it's making decisions that it doesn't lead to harm. And I just don't think that the technology is there just yet to make decisions with 100% confidence. Like, it's getting good where it can make decisions. But all those other capabilities, whether it's process design, creation, simulation, execution, review, and optimization, all of that alone, we feel is a pretty massive shift in terms of the capability of software in manufacturing.
I think that's awesome. Like, just listening to that, and like I've been pretty as distilled as I can be as an external recruiter in personalized medicine or cell and gene therapy or whatever that is. And like, they talk about the potential issues of where that, what's happening there. And these companies, well, at least some of them are a bit of a sinkhole for cash that goes in, and for me, like, you talk about that, and that's where my mind goes. It's like, this could really be a cash saver as well as, making your life easier.
So what's really interesting on that cash savings note, structurally in the industry, we are seeing the early innings of the economic structure of the space starting to change. What do I mean by that? Because that's a pretty big statement. The Inflation Reduction Act, which was designed and approved and turned into law last year, still a little bit more detailed to be finessed, but generally the concept here in the US at least, which will, for what it's worth, have impact globally, is for the first time the US government is able to negotiate prices on a per unit basis for initially the top 20 branded drugs, and then by 2030 that expands to the top 80. But along the way, they can also set reference prices for certain molecules, which, suffice to say, ripples through literally everything. So it's one of these things where what's so interesting about the Inflation Reduction Act is you can look at it in two ways, because in general, this industry has been an industry for 100 plus years of supernatural returns. And so we're bridging over a little bit to the finance side of life sciences. Obviously, you have the mission-driven side, you have the scientific side of it, you have all the really, really intelligent and hardworking and motivated and driven individuals who are trying to do really great things for humanity at a humanity scale. On the other side, there are economics in this space, and there is the kind of financial component of life sciences. And for a very long time, the kind of thesis has always been, if you look at the pharma economic curve, you spend 10 years below the curve, spending on average like $1.8 billion before you even make a dollar, right? This is everything on research, clinical trials, clinical manufacturing, regulatory filing, all types of stuff that happens pre-commercial approval. And so once it actually gets approval, it comes up above the curve and you're trying to maximize your revenue over the exclusivity window prior to when traditionally generics or biosimilars come in. And what that will do is it'll drop the revenues quite dramatically. And there's many, many, many examples of this in the space. And if you're a CFO in this world, this is what you're constantly managing. You're managing the life cycle. It's probably a better word for listeners to relate to. The life cycle of a therapeutic, right? Now, the interesting thing is that historically, that above the curve part, the whole in-market bit, the commercial piece of it, has been uncapped, super, like just at a massive scale, as fast as you can go and as much as you can go. A current example of this is the GLP-1s, the GLP-1s, the obesity drugs, for those not familiar with the term. Right now, that is a time to scale problem. How fast can you scale? Because demand far exceeds supply. And so the goal there is to maximize the supply on this thing as much as you can go. But with the Inflation Reduction Act now, if, and this is a big if because there's still a lot of detail, it needs to be finessed here in the US, but if the per unit cost per therapeutic sold is negotiated downward, where in the past, of course, there was very high margins for all these molecules. If the per unit price goes down, and if you're the CFO of that same business I was mentioning just a moment ago, you have a new challenge. You have a new challenge because your financial model was saying one thing to justify the $1.8 billion that you're investing into this thing. And now your financial model is saying something different. And so that different piece, right, when you just do the simple math, if you are then trying to ensure that your business is remaining profitable and that you can then take those profits and reinvest it in the next molecule, the next discovery, the next kind of breakthrough, because that's the cycle of pharma. You spend a lot of money early, you try to commercialize it, you take those profits, you move them back into R&D, and you do it all over. And it's like a beautiful symbiotic relationship where humanity benefits, the companies benefit. It really is quite thoughtful. Anywho, if you're now in a situation where your unit price comes down, and you're the CFO of that same business, and you're trying to figure out, whoa, wait a second, how do I ultimately recapture some of this lost margin that is being negotiated away now by the US government in order to invest back into those early molecules that need funding for discovery? They need that. The only way is to optimize manufacturing. That's it. Because if you can optimize your manufacturing process and recoup cost, which is kind of where this question started, and I know I went off on a bit of a tangent, and it sounds a bit existential, but in many ways, I really do believe that this economic change in the space is an existential level change that's happening in life sciences. The only way to really truly recapture back what's lost on the per unit price that's going to get negotiated is to optimize manufacturing. And so to us, there's only a few ways to do that. You can either use better equipment, which is really hard. You got to buy new equipment or invent new equipment. You can somehow make your people or materials more efficient, which is frankly hard to do. Or you can use software, where the software then looks at all this data, manages the entire process, and tries to find ways with AI to be able to optimize this process, recapture the dollar, and ultimately claw back some of the margins that were lost that are going to get negotiated away. So this way, ultimately those businesses still can take those profits, reinvest it back into R&D, and do the thing that this industry has been phenomenal at, which is new groundbreaking discoveries that ultimately benefit, mankind.
Yeah, I think I hadn't actually heard about that, being capped and all of that, like, which makes this even more interesting. I think it would, people would be really interested in optimizing their manufacturing and making more money to invest more money in early stage drugs, regardless of that. But with that, it just solves an issue, which is amazing. And I just want to finish on one question, Angelo. It's something I'm genuinely interested in. It's your mindset as an entrepreneur. You talked about those earlier days at Apprentice, which for me are like just inspiring. You sat in a room coding, and that's how it all started. Like I think that's incredible. Just share, just to finish us off, some of the key entrepreneurial principles and how they've influenced your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll kind of break this one down into how do I manage myself and then how do I manage the business, because they are intertwined and in many ways sometimes inseparable, but they're really critical to the business's success. So this summer was the Paris Olympics, and I absolutely love the Olympics. I'm a huge Olympics fan because there's swimming. And I was a former collegiate swimmer and I swam for a long time. My girls are swimming now. I just love the sport. I don't know why. I just love the sport. But the interesting thing that I come back to and I anchor around to manage myself is, and this, for the folks that watch the Olympics who kind of get this analogy, our role as swimmers is you wake up every day and for 4+ hours a day, you stare at a black line at the bottom of a pool every single day. There's very little human interaction. There's a lot of pain, physical pain. And your job as a swimmer is to every day show up, jump in a cold pool, to be clear, especially in New Jersey in the middle of the winter, cold. And then every single day, do it over and over and over again and go through this experience in which is very rewarding, right? Because to achieve what especially the athletes at Paris achieved, or in my case, I was not to that level whatsoever, but there's an extreme level of fulfillment when you can push yourself to that level and have that level of discipline. And in many ways, startups are very similar because there will always be a challenge. There will always be a problem. There will always be something unique that needs to be solved. And I approach startups over this last 10 years now, and the startups I had before Apprentice, the same way, which is every morning I wake up and no, I'm not jumping in a cold pool anymore or doing any of that crazy nonsense. But I just try to keep this rhythmic pulse for myself to really truly manage the ups and the downs, the lefts and the rights, and try to stay focused on the mission. Because then when it bridges over into, the actual management side of this, so if I can keep myself focused, if I can grind through every day, if I can keep myself in a cheery disposition, well, then it's what am I trying to accomplish? And so that's where then I've had a really tight discipline around clear objectives for the business. So our objective is by 2030, so by the end of the decade, we still have 6 more years to go, is to produce 35% of the world's drugs. We know exactly how many facilities that is. We know exactly how many molecules that is. We know exactly how many runs that is. We've defined our goal. And so what we do there is once we have our stated mission, 35% of the world's drugs by 2030, we then work backwards every year between now and 2030. And by the way, we came up with this objective back in, I think, almost 2020 now. So 10 years, we gave ourselves a decade-long goal. And we've been marching towards this every year then. And so what we did is we then worked backwards from this. And we said, all right, if our goal is 35% of the world's drugs by the end of the decade, how do you get there? How do you get there? And so it starts with product, obviously, and to truly have the best product on the market. And for what it's worth, I believe at this stage that Apprentice is 5 generations ahead of the market, where we're not just a modern and cloud system and we have the UI is really great. The operators love using this thing. That's kind of Gen 1. Gen 2 is the fact that we've built this thing for cell and gene therapy. And we're seeing a lot of traction on the gene therapy side in particular, now that they have commercial approval. We then built out a vertically integrated platform with our MES, our automation system, our LES, eLogs, EDMS, et cetera, all in one platform. We have our connected manufacturing network, which is a unique thing of its kind, where we connect everything together. And then we have AI and AR all in one. But the point is we had to start with product because we needed to have a product capable of producing 35% of world's drugs. And the only way to do that was to not just be an MES, not just have augmented reality. It was to be a manufacturing platform. So if we knew that that was the goal, that's what we had to do if we want to have an ambition this high, well, then we had to work backwards from that. And we had to figure out, well, how do we then build this thing? How do we then work with our customers to make sure we built it right? How do we then deploy it, which was the next big challenge, because, okay, cool, you can build the software, but can you actually deploy this in a regulated space and be successful with it and meet the quality bar that our customers have? That in and of itself was a massive challenge that took multiple years, not just in terms of product, but company maturity, process maturity, people maturity, you name it, had to go into quality. But then along the way, we then break all that down into quarterly objectives and key results. I'm really, really big on OKRs, objectives and key results. And, objectives and key results, people may confuse them with KPIs. And I know it's like acronym soup over here, but KPIs are a metric. It's like, what are your sales this quarter? That's not the same as an objective. An objective for us would be, we want to deploy our software in 90 days in order to provide the highest value to our customers in order to unlock XYZ, whatever it is. We state a very clear objective that's measurable, so it kind of feels like a KPI, but it's a very clear business objective connected to the road to 35% of the world's drugs by the end of the decade. And so when you break the business down into big vision, then into product, then into yearly goals and objectives, then to quarterly goals and objectives, well, then you can break that down into individual goals and objectives, because it creates a really beautiful cascade. So if we wanted to, again, up-level the product to a new version, what does that mean then? That means then product needs to define the requirements. Well, then who is doing that? Our product team, and we then break it down to who on product owns what. But then we have engineering. So then who in engineering builds this, does this, et cetera, in what period of time? I know I'm focusing a lot on engineering and product, but it's just easy to relate to. You can do the exact same thing in sales or delivery or other parts of the business. The theory holds. But the takeaway is that I like to then look at this business, set a clear objective, work backwards from that objective, create clear objectives every quarter, ladder that down to every one. And then from there, you align the team, you motivate the team, and you try to get the team to then hit those objectives, regardless of how ambitious they are. Because at times, they can sound a bit ridiculous, but I have been shocked and surprised countless times over my 10 years as an apprentice, just what this team and what humans are capable of when you put a big, ambitious goal in front of them. Yeah, maybe we don't get all of it, right? And that's okay. But even if we got half of it, it's still better than what anyone else is doing in this market. So that's where, for me, it's how do I manage myself? How do I keep myself disciplined? I always anchor back to swimming because it's kind of instilled a sense of discipline in me and drive and passion and just routineness. And then on the business, I like to break it down, big objective to yearly, to quarterly, to daily, to person, all along the way. And if you can sprinkle in some fun too, well then, you got a nice magical formula. And so it's been quite a journey, learned quite a bit, but that's just my approach to entrepreneurship and how I manage myself.
No, I love that. I can massively relate to OKRs. That's something we do in the business. And I think that big, ambitious statement only really adds to the drive we have in our company. So I imagine it's the same. And the reason they do it is because it's big, it's exciting. It's like, wow, look, and then when you break it down into the key results, it's like, this is actually genuinely achievable when you think about it, which I love. But look, thanks so much for coming on, Angelo. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Likewise, Max. And I wish you and the team the absolute best. And a big thank you for inviting me here onto the pod. And thank you for letting us announce our 7.4 AI capability here as well. And so, looking forward to potentially being on a future pod as well as we continue to innovate here in the space.
100%. I think that's a great idea. And look, everyone, please subscribe to the BioHub podcast. Pleasure. Thanks, Angelo.
Thanks, Max.